welcome to our APICS Inland Empire webinar series, Navigating Through Volatility. I'm excited to have our panelists here today to talk about the future of manufacturing and what they're experiencing with coronavirus, and more importantly, what we're thinking is going to change and what the future of manufacturing will look like, and how we can thrive in that environment. I will introduce our panelists, and then we will get started. So let's see here. We have, so I'm one of the panelists, and Lisa Anderson, president of LMA Consulting Group, and also president of APICS Inland Empire. I'm an expert in manufacturing strategy and end-to-end supply chain, and I partner with clients to create a superior customer experience and increase profitability and cash flow. John Armstrong is the owner and the VP of Operations for Do It American, a manufacturer created with the goal to provide good jobs and to make great products and to prove that it can be made in America, which is especially appropriate to our times right now. So it should be interesting to hear how that goes. Do It American is also won the 2018 Manufacturing Council of the Inland Empire's Innovation Award for Human Capital. We also have Alan Braggins, who is Advanced Manufacturing Statewide Director for the Centers for Applied Competitive Technologies and the Regional Director, Employee Engagement for Advanced Manufacturing for the Inland Empire Desert Regional Consortium. And then we also have Jim Gitney. Jim is the CEO of Group 50 Consulting and a member of the Board of Advisors of, I'm not sure if this is how you say it, Jim, but Thanair. You can correct me, I guess, later. He has over 30 years experience in world-class companies ranging from startups to Fortune 50 companies, including GE, Black & Decker, and Pankow Aerospace. And then Roy Paulson, who will be joining us shortly as I am able to promote him, is president of Paulson Manufacturing, a manufacturer of safety equipment, and a board member of the National Association of Manufacturers. And he'll share his insights and experience with regards to the local economy. He's certainly knee-deep in personal protective equipment, which is appropriate right now, as well as he's been a member of the National Export Council as well. So welcome to the panelists, and I think I'll kick it off by having maybe start with like some a minute or so of general comments surrounding the coronavirus and what you've done to work through it, or in Jim's case, what you've seen your clients doing to successfully navigate. So with that said, John, I think I'll turn it to you, and I will work to get Roy promoted while we do that.
Okay, well, good luck. So I saw a comment as we were getting started. Somebody said I had the best virtual background. I'm actually out in the street in front of my building. So if I have to get up and move, it's because a car is coming. So for us, this thing's been it's been pretty interesting. It started with immediate phone calls from all our customers saying you don't dare shut down. And so we told everybody, well, we don't have any intention of shutting down because we're considered an essential business. So a lot of our products are for gas utilities. And so without our products, they can't continue to maintain the gas infrastructure. So pretty basically we're an essential business. So we stayed open, and we actually had a gentleman show up on a Wednesday, and he had a brother that had tested positive for COVID. And so we're like, why are you here? So he went home, and he turned out, we found out shortly after that he was positive. So we were doing really good on production schedules. We were way out in front. We backed off to, we normally have 30 people in the shop. We backed off to 8 just to keep material flowing. And I think we did social distancing in the absolute extreme and made it through that period, and nobody else got it. And we slowly ramped back up. So we've been back at, this was pretty early on in this whole thing. So we've been back at full strength now for this is our 4th week. And everything's going good. We really didn't miss a beat on it. It's just, thing that I'm particularly proud of is just how well all of the employees have dealt with this, how they showed up, how they wanted to show up, and how we've we've made it through this. So continue to go. Our business from a volume perspective has not decreased. We still see orders and we see lots of opportunities, I think, for the future. A lot of it because of the Made in America thing. Oh, Lisa.
Great. Yeah, thank you, John. All right, how about Jim and then Alan? Why don't one of you go next, and I'm working with Roy on the other, trying to get him working.
Okay, well, Lisa, thank you for asking me to be part of this. It's a great honor. I mean, our business covers many different industries and clients that we work with, and we have several restaurant clients, we have several manufacturing clients, one in the consumer products industry, one in the industrials industry, and one in the protection safety gear industry. And each one of them have basically gone through 3 phases. The initial lockdown, what are we going to do? How are we going to protect our employees? The kind of thing that John just described. Phase 2 they're getting into right now is, what are we going to do for the next 90 days? What's our 90-day tactical plan? Because this next 90 days, as companies are opening up, is going to be incredibly critical to them. And then phase 3 is, what changes are we going to make in our supply chain or our 2020 strategy? How do we take advantage of, can we take advantage of what's happening? Do we have competitors who are weaker that we might be able to gain market share from? Are there opportunistic buys that we can do to bolt on additional businesses? So each industry has to face its own unique recovery model. And one of the things that all of our clients are doing is creating what they believe is that recovery model, and then setting trigger points on additional actions they'll take based on how good or bad their estimates were.
Very good, thank you, Jim. And how about you, Alan?
Well, as statewide director for manufacturing, I get to talk to a lot of manufacturers across the state, and I could echo exactly what Jim said. They're in a middle phase now where they're trying to figure out how they get employees back to work as efficiently as possible, practicing physical distancing requirements. And then the other concern, of course, since I'm in education, is how do we educate the workforce that has now been unemployed, that's going to be looking for new jobs in new careers.
Great, well, thank you. All right, well, so what do you all think, and what do you think is going to be, see, John, you had talked about some new ways of working in the future, and what you think might be permanently different. What do you, so what are some of your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it's kind of some of the detail on how you conduct yourself. I mean, it's weird meeting people and not walking up and giving them a good firm handshake. I've always been one of those guys where you grab on and give them a good handshake, and that's kind of like shows that you appreciate and you're interested in meeting somebody and learning about them. It's weird walking up. It's just like the way we have to behave and conduct ourselves has changed. And I mean, the hand washing thing is something I've always been a big proponent of, but it's weird how we're interacting. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see in the future what we get back to. Hopefully this thing gets knocked out and we get back to normalcy there. But I think the biggest thing for me is what we're doing right now, these conference calls. I mean, I've never been really into them that much. I've always been somebody that wants to meet with people one-on-one. We'll have phone conversations, but I don't want to have a long one. I'd rather come and see you, meet you, and all that kind of stuff. And it's amazing to me within our company, we've done management meetings using Zoom. And part of that was when we had the case in our shop, we all cleared out except for me. I was the only person that came into the office, and then everybody else was out in the shop, the 8 people. So we did our management meetings through Zoom. And the thing is, it focused us. And it was really interesting because we ended up coming to the meeting, I think, each of us much more prepared And it actually ended up being the most productive meetings we've ever had as a management group. So I was actually really surprised at that. You know, since then we've kind of, I think, carried that on. We've now had meetings that are not on Zoom, and I think we've learned to be a little more productive because of this experience. But I think one of the biggest things in the future, now you can have meetings, you know, that I was not used to doing, and I think so many people have learned to do it. Some of our customers, they don't want to be seen. I don't know what's up with that, but you know, I don't think long term, I don't think anything will ever decrease the importance of actually going someplace and sitting and interacting with people directly. It's just not the same, but you can certainly do a lot this way. So I think that's one of the biggest changes I see, the biggest change in the way we're doing things.
Very good. And how about you, Jim? Have you have you had any thoughts on what you think might be permanently different in the future?
So I'm a little more optimistic. Maybe the word's not optimistic. I actually think that John makes a great point about how Zoom has worked, but we have clients who are now holding market with Walmart and Costco and others via Zoom, and they said that they've been the most productive markets they've ever had because they have the buyer's attention, and that they're actually thinking about not going to market anymore. So that's an example of while meeting in person is important, as we've all gotten to learn how to see someone, get to know them a little bit better and trust the image that we're seeing on Zoom, I actually do believe that for me, I'm like John, but I believe that for a lot of other people in the workforce, in business, will be perfectly comfortable with Zoom. The other thing that I've seen significantly different, and one of the questions I ask all of my clients is, take a look at the last 3 months, identify how it was possible that you were able to launch new products in record time, how you were able to get approvals up through the organization in record time, how you were able to do it with fewer people, and actually sit back and see what kind of changes you should be making inside your business so that you can do it all the time, not only when you're in a crisis situation. So those are a couple of examples of clients who have introduced new products, have introduced new services, and have learned to stay closer to their customers and their suppliers in new ways they never did before. Lisa.
Yep. And how about you, Alan? What are you thinking?
You know, I tend to be an optimist on this too. I think we're going to get back to normal much quicker than what the naysayers are saying, right? I think that sometime, you know, as you see, after a week of a lot of states opening up, no change in the amount of new cases, right? It said, oh, gee, you know, and we expect to still have about another million cases across the United States in a normal season. So I think that's what's going to happen is we're going to see probably a flat line for the rest of the summer, maybe a slight uptick come next winter's flu season, as we would with any new flu. And at some point, Americans are going to forget that we have to stay apart, and we're going to start handshaking and hugging and everything else that we do, because we are a people that needs close contact with other people.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, what I'm seeing is, you know, I think some of the remote, you know, I think people are realizing that there's some benefits to remote capabilities. With that said, there's also clearly benefit to in-person. So I think it'll evolve more towards some sort of a hybrid approach that folks will find over time works effectively from that point of view. And there's other things that'll probably stay in effect too, but we'll talk about those. And I was able to transfer the challenge to my colleague to try to get Roy on here, but he is having some technical difficulties. So anyway, so the good news is I can now focus. So all right, so let's see here. So one of the things that you asked Jim earlier was what do we think is important that we focus in on for the next 90 days, as folks are certainly in manufacturing. I've seen that even the client that was considered the least essential was able to keep running at around 20–25%. And so, you know, with the vast majority, we're running between 50 and 70%, I would say, from the manufacturers in this region. But, you know, as we're starting to get back to work, you know, life is, I don't think there's going to be a new normal of any sort. It's going to be like a whole new ball game here. But as folks are starting to get back to work, and that means that volumes will possibly start picking up again. What do you see that folks should be looking at for the next 90 days?
So to your point, Lisa, it's all about what does ramp up look like. So you're bringing your people back to work. You're practicing social distancing. Perhaps you're staggering shifts. You're certainly staggering lunch breaks and those kinds of things as part of this, how I'm reopening my factory. But some of the things that we're going to do differently over the next 90 days is we need to be incredibly close to suppliers and customers to understand what their needs are and what perhaps how their strategies have changed. We're recommending that people go to weekly sales and operational planning sprints, not monthly, not quarterly, weekly, because the news is changing so fast in terms of, you know, Mexico may reopen at the end of May. Hong Kong has got new disruptions associated with the protests and those kinds of things. China is doing things differently than India is. And so in order to be able to be very careful about how you're going to ramp up, what products you're going to make, and what customers you're going to support, it's incredibly important that you're meeting on a weekly basis with your sales and operational planning team to understand what you're going to do. And during this next 90 days, you know, identifying what are the things that you're going to change in terms of business processes to get you fully back up to speed. And I happen to be optimistic like Alan is. I think there are going to be industries that, such as the consumer products industry, that is going to see the floodgates open, because I think June, July, and August are transition months. September through year end are going to be incredibly busy for consumer products. And the reason I say that is because we've all had a really bad year, and we're all going to want to make the holiday season extra special. And so companies need in the next 90 days to try and sit down and figure out what the balance of the economy looks like for them in 2020.
Yeah, I'm working with several clients right now to proactively look at demand, to your point, Jim. So when you're looking at sales and operations planning, it's really all about not even just who your customers are, because I'm working with some like food clients actually, and the demand is radically different depending upon who their customer's customer is, because certainly, obviously, it makes a difference if the customer's customer is a Costco or a Starbucks, because after all, Starbucks are, well, they were only, well, a lot of them were closed and some were only open for drive-through, and my clients' products aren't sold really through the drive-through, or at least they're not advertised, so who's going to remember to buy them? So anyway, so I think you have a really good point as to, you know, like keeping all over the demand, but I also feel quite optimistic about the future. That doesn't mean that we should stick our heads in the sand and just assume it's all going to be great, but we should work diligently to figure out, you know, to be prepared, because the worst thing that's going to happen here is that we all cut back and no one's ready for the onslaught of volume in Q4, to your point, Jim. And so, John, I know that at Do It American, your whole, you know, the crux of your business is really that you can compete successfully with Asia. So I was on a webinar last week on the future of manufacturing with a couple of CEOs of manufacturing companies in the US. And the hot topic on that webinar, as well as strangely enough, I was also on Bloomberg about this topic, so it's really a hot topic, and that is reshoring. So I think, you know, it's gained some momentum, certainly with the what was happening pre-COVID, but COVID has pushed people over the edge into making at least it a popular topic. So I know that you've all along believed that you could compete with Asia. So I thought we'd kick off this reshoring initiative or topic and see what your thoughts are about it, and where you're going from here.
Well, it's, that's one of our core values, is the assumption that, it's just kind of our operating assumption is that you can manufacture here and you can do it competitively. And if our thought has always been, if you can get a potential customer to understand the total cost of bringing something in from overseas, if you're thinking about, lead times or risk or liability or tied up cash or all the additional costs. I used to work for a company that actually sent all their tooling over to Singapore and had all their tooling made over there. And they ran on the assumption that it was cheaper because labor was cheaper, but they didn't realize that a lot of the overhead associated with it, the engineering, the fact that now we got to have some guy over there all the time. It ended up costing a lot more. Plus their company lost their own intellectual ability to make tooling. How can you be a stamper if you don't know how to do it anymore because you don't have any tool makers? So I just think there's so many reasons that people don't think of to manufacture in the US. So many reasons why it's better to do it here. Why are Toyotas made over here? Well, they're made over here so they're close to their customers. So I think this whole experience just has emphasized the importance of, doing that. And it's going to renew opportunities that those of us that are American manufacturers may have to get back in the game and making a whole range of products. So, and then I take it even farther than that. For me, I'm a pretty patriotic guy, probably as much as anybody. And, to me, I think about, there's some folks out there that their goal in life and their whole business model is to shut down American manufacturing and go source it overseas and bring it in. And I know quite a few people that have done that. I don't know how you can sleep at night. That's just me. I hope I'm not hurting anybody in the audience's feelings, but I think it has to be, as an American and a citizen of this country or a citizen of North America, I think we're all in favor of getting stuff at least as close as Mexico. But I think we all need to work together to really do that. Some of the critical stuff, my parents were World War II generation, and they were a little older when I was born. At least that's what I'm telling you guys. But why did we win World War II? It's because we out-manufactured everybody else on the planet, and now we go and we talk about medicine and we don't even make the basic ingredients anymore to make antibiotics over here. That's pretty scary. So we need to fix that. Gotta fix that. So.
Yeah, that's very, very true, especially with, I think that we've gained as a American public, we've gained a new appreciation for essential services or essential businesses. So from that point of view, I think manufacturing is has a unique opportunity here to thrive or to at least expand. And so, Jim, what are you hearing with your clients, or what's your thoughts? Obviously, at least in my opinion, we never want to 100% reshore or offshore, but I think it seems like there's quite a bit of opportunity. What are you hearing on your end, or what are your thoughts on this topic?
So I won't repeat what John said. I completely agree with him. I believe that we've been, as manufacturers, too willing to take the easy way out of buying from Vietnam or China or India or wherever that the lowest cost is, rather than figuring out how to do it more cost effectively ourselves. I'll just add one more thing to what John said, and that's that the rate of supply chain disruption is increasing, whether it's a typhoon or it's a hurricane or it's a port strike or it's tariffs in China or it's a contagion. I mean, the number of supply chain disruptions are getting larger and larger and larger. And so we as manufacturers need to ask ourselves, how do we make our supply chains more resilient by diversifying across multiple vendors, perhaps reshoring so that we can serve our clients faster and better, and have less working capital tied up in a disruption. And so I think that's the key conversation we're having with our clients. And how do you minimize supply chain risk and increase supply chain resiliency? So it's not just about manufacturing in the United States, because to your point, Lisa, you're probably never going to be able to do 100% in the United States or in North America, but you need to figure out how to de-risk your supply chain so that it's much more resilient.
Yeah, absolutely true. What we talked about in the other webinar was there's, a lot of things are converging. Like the cost of labor is certainly increasing in China, and so it's certainly still lower than here, but the cost of labor has been increasing, but more importantly, the percentage of labor to total cost is absolutely decreasing, because as we implement technology, robotics, we have, unfortunately, as all the other costs increase, such as transportation costs, if we look at the cost of inventory, so there's, typically speaking, my clients have at least 3 months of lead time of inventory anyway, to bring it over from Asia. And so that adds up, and the ability to respond to customers rapidly shrinks. And that's actually, I was just talking to a client recently where the cost for them is still higher in the US, because it depends on if you're a commodity product or a non-commodity product. So their total cost might be still a little bit higher, but they're actually thinking about the option because of their ability to respond to customers, to your point about supply chain resiliency, Jim. So I think that there's, a lot of key thoughts to be, that are a lot of trends that are occurring. And then there's as John brought up, the essential nature. Some of these industries, there's just too much risk, and you have to have some level of diversification and the ability to produce, in-house and close by. So I think there's a lot of factors that are adding up here for a movement in reshoring. And I'll ask you all about preparing for that. But Alan, that leads me to you, because you're focused on the advanced manufacturing topic for several groups that you're related to. So I wanted to ask you about that, because certainly technology relates to this reshoring topic.
Who was that directed to, Lisa?
Alan.
Okay.
Okay,
Sorry.
we missed part of your question, Lisa. You froze.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I was just saying that technology and robotics and, all of those pieces are making manufacturing in the US and North America much more attractive. And I know that that's your bailiwick, is advanced manufacturing. So I wanted you to speak on that for a minute, if you could.
Well, sure. And of course, there's that threat of as we move to a robotic or automated manufacturing, that we're going to lose jobs. And I read Brookings, I read McKinsey, everybody says the same thing. No, they're going to be different jobs. They're going to be a higher wage level, higher technical level job that's going to replace the lower entry level job. And I think that's great. And I think that's what we're trying to train for in our schools, is that the industrial maintenance mechanic or mechatronics mechanic, whatever term you prefer to use to that. But absolutely, I think that's a big thing. And I'm actually really pleased with our manufacturers. I know a couple clothing manufacturers in Los Angeles that instantly shifted to making masks or making full body suits. One of them actually got a machine from China that cut the patterns much quicker than they were doing before by hand. And he's going to do exactly what China did to us. He says he's going to reverse engineer it and start selling those machines in America, made in America. And bravo for him, right? Let's bring it back. So.
Yeah, very, very good. Well, and Roy Paulson, who was having some technical difficulties, so he couldn't talk to us, and half the time couldn't hear us. I thought I would tell his story briefly. So he makes safety equipment in the Inland Empire and has been significant on the nation's export council. Well, since he makes personal protective equipment, certainly he, as you can imagine, his business has been going like gangbusters. And actually, he's told me that he's doubled his workforce since COVID started. And it started for him, you know, when it started with Asia, because he already was sold out many times over and purchased new machines. So he's certainly on the forefront from the other side of things. But he wanted to talk about in this webinar, you know, what, as we start to rehire, well, in his case, you know, he's hiring from the beginning, but as manufacturers are thinking about rehiring, if they've had to furlough or lay off employees, what types of skills should we be rehiring for, or should we be hiring the same skills as we had previously? So I think that relates to this technology conversation. So I don't know, does anybody want to take that one on?
I can say a couple of things. I think from our perspective, I mean, our main thing, one of our things we do with our folks is it's always attitude and aptitude that's the most important thing. The skills, we can learn those things. And, you know, and back to the technology, I mean, our people are excited about running robots. They're excited about the welders are running a welding robot. How cool is that? So, I mean, they're not afraid of the technology. It's all fantastic. It's fantastic stuff. But I think from our perspective, we're looking at hiring a couple of folks. We're looking at accounting a person and an engineering person. And what a great time to be out there putting ads out there, because all of a sudden there's people out there that are looking, some really good people. So, I mean, we're just taking advantage of the situation, I think. But I don't know that we're looking for anybody specifically in our requirements that's different than what we would have looked at before. We just think there's more opportunities to find people. And again, it always goes back to the right attitude and the right aptitude, and we can do the rest.
Well, you know, that I find that to be absolutely true. With that said, I think for folks who aren't learning to who aren't thinking about continually learning, I think that their prospects are going to dwindle. Whereas those folks who are thinking about learning continuously are, you know, I think they'll have vast opportunity. And on the other hand, I think now is an opportune time for hiring to take place. I have seen several of my clients hiring good people they couldn't find pre-COVID. How about you, Jim? What are you hearing about this topic?
It's exactly the same thing. In the 90-day tactical plan, we talk about if you have one or two key hires, executive level, or somebody you need inside your organization, you need to get it now, because you won't be able to after the first of the year, in all likelihood. The second piece is that we're going through this transition in the workforce where, you know, some people are choosing not to come back. Some people are choosing to go to different areas. So this is the perfect opportunity to get the kind of people that John talked about with the right attitude and the right aptitude into the business to strengthen the workforce. That's part of the 90-day tactical plan. It needs
there you
to be.
Go.
See, I didn't think I had a 90-day tactical. I guess I did.
Yeah.
That's what I learned.
You do.
Alan, did you want to add something?
But I have a manufacturer in the San Francisco Bay Area that's absolutely looking for a quality control manager, an engineering manager, those types of positions. And whereas when I met with them March 13th, right, the day before, right, March 13th, they couldn't find any qualified candidates. Well, now they've been actually able to fill one of the positions and are getting, you know, applicants for the other ones. If any of our manufacturers out there are looking in the next 6 months, even not just 90 days, but next 6 months to fill a higher level position, act quick, because I tell you what, August 1st, I think we're going to see a different picture out there on available employees.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as Jim says, if it takes off in the fourth quarter, everybody's going to be panicking. So it's certainly best to Or go ahead, Jim.
Lisa, if I might make up one other point. So I want to qualify my statement and say that I was talking about the consumer products industry.
Well, that's a good point.
Right.
I mean,
So
retail.
cruise lines, I mean, you know, who's going to go on a cruise in the next year or 18 months? So each industry is going to be completely different. And that gives you an opportunity to find people from other industries that perhaps can provide you with some more best practices, can provide you with a different set of eyes into how you manage your business or how you create your strategy. So there are going to be, while if you're looking for somebody specifically in CPG, I agree with Alan. August, September is going to be a different model, but there are other industries that are going to be terrible for the next 6 to 9 to 12 months that we should open our minds and say, hey, I'm willing to look at a quality manager or a financial analyst or, you know, a chief operating officer who comes from a different industry.
I think you're absolutely right. Because, for example, well, certainly retail and in-store retail is certainly not looking great because as e-commerce is taking off. I mean, one of my clients that had it as a very small percentage of their business is now up to more than 10%. And that's a big number for, you know, a mid-sized manufacturer. And actually across all of my clients, the only part that's growing 100% across the board is e-commerce. So certainly, and that relates to CPG, to your point, Jim. With that said, though, I was on a call with some folks who support some retail industries, and those were hard hit, or hospitality, I should say, the hospitality industry, and that's going to be tough. It's going to take some time for that one, for big conferences to take place again, like Google and Microsoft, I think, canceled all their in-person events through June of next year or something like that. Another one is aerospace. Like, certainly people will start flying again, but I don't know how much they're going to, I think, this whole virtual, the success of virtual is bound to cut a little bit into business travel over the long term, as well as for the next year until a vaccine's ready. I don't know. I think I'm a little skeptical. With that said, defense carries on, but I don't know. To your point, Jim, it really very much depends on the industry, very much depends on your customer's customer. And actually, from that point of view, you should be looking at your suppliers also, and who do they support? Because your supplier might be very important to you, and it might seem like you have a lot of volume, but if they also support an industry that's going downhill, can they make it through, or what will happen to you? So I think it's the time to get all over your end-to-end supply chain. So we have some questions from the audience. I think we'll intersperse a few in here. One is particularly interested in the supply chain impacts from the conflict in Hong Kong. Do any of us have any insights on that, or we'll kick it to someone else?
Lisa, I think the comment that I'll make on that one is that's just another example of a disruption that you need to be prepared for. So as part of a 90-day plan or even a 2020 strategy, Hong Kong is going to continue getting worse, and it's eventually going to come under complete and total Chinese control. So if you're on a supplier diversification strategy, and I was your strategic advisor, we would be talking about how you get out of Hong Kong.
Yeah, and actually it just reminds me, because it's related, but we had John Tulak, international business attorney, on one of our webinars in the past about global impacts, and there was a new law passed in China in December, so pre-COVID, but it's certainly making China less and less attractive, because it basically means if any data goes through a server in China, which of course if you're working with China, that would be everything, the government can see it. So it pretty much means your information is no longer really private. So there's a lot of risks, to your point, Jim, to assess. However, not everyone can leave China at once, or that would be a disaster as well. So who will be first, I guess. Go ahead, John. Did you have? It sounded like you had something you might want to say.
No, I don't know too much about Hong Kong, quite frankly. Sorry.
No, that's okay. All right.
Can't help you there.
No, that's all right. We have another question here. So related to supply chain risk assessments, how are each of us collecting supplier information and their readiness? So whether they're from far away, or like John, maybe you have suppliers that are all like close by. I don't know for sure, but it doesn't matter. How are we assessing the readiness? So who would like to kick that one off?
Our suppliers are all, I mean, yeah, they're all pretty local. And we, when all this, it's kind of interesting how this happened for us. We got phone calls from all of our utility customers, and, saying, don't shut down. And then before we were even able to call our suppliers, they were calling us asking about the stability of our business and what was happening. So I think for us, we've just been in constant communication. I think the whole thing that's made this work for us, whether it's with our employees or whatever, for example, during the period where we were shut down, which was about 2 weeks of complete shutdown, and another 2 weeks to ramp back up, we were calling employees at home every couple of days just to see how they were doing and how's your health, and just all that stuff, not only just to find out if we had a serious problem, if this thing had spread, but just to let people know we were there and we care about them and we want them back. So that over communication, I think, was key. And we've done that with our suppliers too. And, we were part of the reason a number of our suppliers were able to stay open, because we were considered essential by the utilities. They were considered essential because without them, we're not going to be doing anything. So.
Yeah, very good.
Gone
very
well.
Good point. How about you, Jim? How are you seeing your best clients assess for readiness, or what would you recommend, and what are you seeing take place out there?
So what John described is exactly what we're recommending our clients. You need to stay in close, creative contact with your suppliers and your customers. The issue that you have is that as you get into China and India, if you have major suppliers there, it's difficult to get information from them. And it's also difficult to trust the information that you're getting in some instances. So we're actually going to be launching a supplier assessment that'll allow you to take a company, its address, as far upstream as you want. So you talk to your tier 1 suppliers, you can talk to them on a daily basis, but what about their suppliers and their suppliers' suppliers? And you're going to wake up, to your point, Lisa, and find out that one of your suppliers of a key component is no longer in business.
Yep.
And so using global databases and stuff, we'll be able to get a completed risk assessment for suppliers as far upstream as you want to go. And I think that's all part of what corporate organizations call risk management, supply chain risk management. And far too many lower middle market companies don't do that anymore.
Yeah, very, very true. The funny thing about this is that the 80-20 really seems to be the uncommon common sense things that we really should be doing all along. I think, to John's point earlier, is a lot of these fundamentals are what's made you successful at doing American, so you can compete with Asia, since that was your mantra. But it's really a lot of these concepts we're talking about. I wrote an ebook on manufacturers emerging successfully from COVID and how they can do that. And as I sat down to write it, I realized, 99% of this is evergreen, because it's really what we should be doing all along. That's at least what I found. And it sounds like you're finding the same, Jim.
Yep.
So Alan, I have some other questions here, but I think I'd like to talk to you a bit about what you think, which technologies do you think are going to be most important in the coming months or years as that will help manufacturers thrive, post COVID, because I know that that's certainly a key piece of what you're looking into it in terms of advanced manufacturing. And I don't think we can do it all manually anymore, but like everything else, there's always a hybrid approach. You want to know how to do things manually, but you want to leverage tools to do it successfully.
And I think that's one of the big things, right? We're going to have to learn how everything connects to everything else. So one of my personal concerns with our small to medium-sized manufacturers is their attention to cybersecurity. Because as we bring in more and more automated devices that depend on our networks, we're also opening those networks up to attack, right? And we know, we've all seen the Jeep that was driven off the road in the test, right? Or we've seen how steel mill in Germany was overheated because someone was able to hack into it. That's a big concern. So what we're trying to do when we educate our students is to get them connected, not just the basic information technology side of things, but how that interacts. At the same time, training them on the manual process, because you don't want someone operating a CNC machine or a hydraulic press or something that doesn't know how to do it manually, doesn't understand what that function is, at least have that big picture of what they're doing. And so I honestly think that we're going to still have a dependence on a basic machine shop type technology for at least a number of years until something else happens. One of the other things that we've run into since we've pushed all of our students out to their homes is the ability to do design online. Very few Autodesk or Fusion's 360 or SolidWorks, they don't run on a Chromebook. Yeah. Most of our students have Chromebooks, right? And that's been a real issue. So how do we educate that next generation to do it all in the cloud? And that's another issue, right? We don't want to put all of our technology in the cloud, because what happens if that gets so there's a lot of interplay there between all the different things. But I think all in all, we're really poised to attack well. I hate to say that this has been a good thing, but in a lot of ways, we've learned what our shortcomings are, and I think we're going to be able to, as all Americans do, right? We're going to react to them. We're going to make a bigger, stronger, better manufacturing system.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up cybersecurity, because that's definitely a hot topic. I heard some horrifying statistics about how much it's increased since COVID, since they realized that there's a lot of nice targets out there. And Cal State San Bernardino has a great program in cybersecurity. So,
and if you think back to your smaller shops, right? Who's the IT specialist in the shop? Well, it's probably the accountant, because they were the first person with a computer, right? And they might not have any training at all. So you kind of feel bad for the position they were put in, right? But yeah, both Chaffey and San Bernardino Valley have great programs. Riverside Community College has a great program. And all of them are now offering online courses. So you can send while that person is at home, working from home, they can also take a course. So I think that's an opportunity too.
Well, that's a great point. And actually, speaking of which, I'd be remiss to say that APICS Inland Empire offers a great fundamental, the fundamentals, and also we now have some advanced certificates in end-to-end supply chain, our CSCP, as well as the end-to-end logistics, I would say, from our CLTD. And we are starting to offer those online. So you'll be getting an announcement from us soon. We're going to kick off some classes in July online, and I think it'll be a wave of the future, is a combination of hybrid online as well as in person. So that's interesting. I hadn't thought about the CAD complication previous to this, but I do think that additive manufacturing has some potential. John or Jim, do you have any thoughts on additive additive manufacturing, and if you're seeing it in in your clients or in your workspace?
Go ahead, John.
You have us on mute, John.
If I can figure out how to push the unmute button.
It's okay. You're at least on the call.
yeah, that's true. I get a B for that.
That's right.
Yeah, additive manufacturing. We just bought our first 3D printer.
Awesome. Well, what
That's
time,
all I
right?
can say. We're using it for making some jigs and fixtures and stuff. I mean, we're a welding shop, a lot of welding and assembly and machinery, and machining and CNC machining and all that. I don't see in what we're doing a huge impact in the actual product we're making. But we're already starting to use it a little bit for some tooling and fixturing and jigs and that kind of stuff. And who knows, maybe prototyping before too long. So.
Yeah, very true. How about you, Jim?
So additive manufacturing is one of those technologies that allows you to rethink how you design a product. I mean, you can create structural lattices that in nature are some of the strongest formations man's ever come across, but that you could never machine. And so I think that, you know, part of the opportunity for students and people who want to learn a new skill is what does additive manufacturing bring to the table in terms of rethinking your designs. And I'll just leave you with one last thought. Studies have shown that companies that are innovative and transformative during a recession end up performing 15 to 20% better than their peers when the economy comes back. Additive manufacturing is one of those transformative ideas. And, you know, we've had a significant emotional event, which creates a huge change management opportunity, and everybody's willing to do like they were never before. So I think additive manufacturing and dozens of other ideas will really make a difference for a company coming out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's well worth staying on top of what makes sense for your industry, just like everything else. Not every technology, just because it's cool, makes sense for you. So figure out which ones make sense and will drive your business forward in terms of your meeting your customers' needs profitably. And that's what I see happening. I have a question that's really a comment that I thought I'd throw out here, because it's from a manufacturer that said that they tried to bid on PPE equipment, but the 3-week lead times were way too long. And then 3 weeks later, they were still trying to bid on the same project. So they changed their strategy and built a face mask, ear relief strap, and have donated now 5,000 to hospitals, nursing homes, pharmacies, and businesses. So they, you know, changed our manufacturing strategies to work more efficiently, and they, you know, they had lost business to China for many years, and now they've added new options to try and to make us more competitive with tooling. So I think it's another great example. I think that one of the strengths that, I don't know, we've talked about it sort of around it, but the U.S. in particular, and actually California in particular, is quite known for our innovative abilities. So I think that's one of the things that will definitely be part of our success in the future. Let's see, we
Agreed.
Also, yeah, I know John agrees, because, well, actually everybody on this call is quite innovative. Let's see, they had a couple questions here, and then we'll wrap up. So one of them was, I think, listening to your conversation pre-webinar, and has asked, what about the percentage of manufacturers that we see migrating to either Mexico or Japan? Or are you seeing either of those two places as being popular, and in either, probably Alan or Jim?
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, you know, there was a movement to Mexico a couple years back, but I think that's actually even slowed down quite a bit. I don't know that strongly about the move to Japan. I actually worked for a company for several years that manufactured rubber tires in Japan, and that supply chain has the same issue, some of the same issues that Jim talked about, right? Bunker fuel was our big issue, right? As the price of bunker fuel rises and drops, it made tires very hard to bring over to the United States. So we started manufacturing them in Georgia and Tennessee, and could be competitive that way. There are a lot of that's why I'm a proponent of reshoring wherever possible, while still maintaining the global supply chain. So,
yeah, Lisa, the conversation prior to the start of the webinar, the government of Japan has announced $20 billion to be paid to manufacturing companies as incentives to bring product from China and other places back to Japan. So this was around the government actually being proactive and telling their manufacturers, we're going to give you however that $20 billion is paid in order to bring things back. As far as Mexico is concerned, the question that manufacturers in the United States are asking is, how many times do I want to get bit by the China bug with tariffs, contagion, nationalism, and all those other kinds of things before I finally make the decision to nearshore my product? This morning, my whole morning was spent on the phone with companies who want to bring either product components from China to Mexico or actually set up their own Mexico operation. So while Alan may be correct, I actually think that more and more companies who are dependent on China or any other country who, as part of a diversification strategy, has to think about sourcing from the United States and Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, I have found the same. I mean, I see a big wave for the US, and there's some definite advantages in terms of, especially as we can implement things like additive manufacturing and produce right close to the customer, and rapid changes in orders, and how do we respond to them, and there's quite a bit of an innovative culture here. With that said, there's a lot of interest as well in Mexico, although I think Alan, you're right that the interest is slightly lower than it was in the past, but as they if the product is significant in labor cost, which is reducing, the percentage of labor cost is nowhere near what it was when everyone was outsourcing to China. But if the percentage is quite high, Mexico actually has a lower labor cost, fully burdened, than China does, and certainly than the US does. So it can provide a good alternative. Of course, it all depends. What does the transportation cost look like on the product? What's the inventory cost? You have to add all these things up. But that's what I'm finding. As far as Japan being an alternative, I think they're seen more like the US, like a high quality manufacturer, but I don't see anyone outsourcing to Japan per se, although I think it's admirable that they're taking a proactive approach. They may be sourcing more of their volume into Japan.
Yeah.
Where I do see people moving is from China to Vietnam, although Vietnam, its infrastructure can only keep up with so much volume because China is so huge. But I am seeing people move to Vietnam, and they're doing quite well. I mean, several of my clients have been quite happy with that. And they're also moving to India, although I don't know. There's a lot of challenges there with infrastructure, but they definitely are interested in India. So I don't know. Does anyone else have any comments on that, or we'll move on to the next question? All right. Okay, well then let's see here. So I think we've answered them all, although I don't know, John, if I was intrigued by your question about the psychological impact on employees. Were you able to talk about that when I was trying to get Roy online successfully, or would you like to address it?
Yeah, let me make a couple comments. I think for us, and this may be, I attribute our success as a company really to the culture that we've created within the company. And, my background is working with a Toyota supplier and that kind of stuff. So I kind of had an idea of what the culture was we wanted, and it just seems like the right thing to do. So we've created this culture, and I think we've been able to even reinforce that more through this experience, and it's really kind of tied us together. And it's pretty cool because a lot of the employees that we have, maybe they're younger employees, and they weren't around at 9/11, believe it or not, or even they weren't working in 2007, 2008 when things all went south, and so this is their first time they've been working and had any level of responsibility in their life. Maybe they're married now, maybe they have kids, but it's their first time that there's been a large scale strain put on them. And so now all of a sudden they're seeing family members and friends being laid off and losing businesses and all these kind of things, and people getting sick. And I think to have a business that's doing okay and to be doing the right things for your employees, I don't think they'll ever forget it. So I think it's just been, from that perspective, it's been a positive thing in that we've built some loyalty, but I think it's been, yeah, I mean, it's just been a good thing. I think it's caused some of the younger employees to actually grow up and realize and appreciate what they have a little bit more. I mean, the people that stayed home from our company, we didn't know if we were going to get reimbursed or what was going to happen, but we paid them. And those people that came in when we had the reduced workforce, we gave them a 50% premium. And we didn't know if we were going to be able to afford that, but it's like, you know what, we'll do it. And I honestly think those people that did come in during that period of time, were they 50% more productive? I think they probably were, because they were so attentive and so focused. It was just, I'm really proud of the people that work here in this company. So.
Wow, that's really impressive. But you reminded me of one of the key points that I made in the ebook that I forgot to bring up. I think it's really quite critical, is that relationships move faster during these times of crisis than at any other time. So I think the question is, which way do we want them to be moving? Quite obviously, in a positive direction. But you know, a lot of the little things we're doing matter significantly, not just to employees, although you have to start there, but also with customers, suppliers. I mean, I don't think people will forget this period of time anytime soon.
You know, just to add one thing, the most meaningful thing that happened to me for this whole experience, I had a guy, Brian Hannon. He's in charge of all procurement for Southern Company, which is, you know, a huge utility. They make Nicor, AGL, all those big utilities. He called and he said, hey, I heard you guys had a COVID case. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I don't give a crap. And that's it. He used a little more derogatory word, but he said, I really don't care about the supply chain. He said, I don't really care about whether you guys are going to run out of product for us and stuff. He said, I just want to know that you guys are okay. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so for us to wrap up, maybe I thought each of you would give us a concluding thoughts. And Jim, I know that you had some other questions about 2020. So, but whatever you would, you know, a concluding thought. Let's start with you, Jim.
So my concluding thought is to segue off of what John is saying. You have an opportunity to be innovative and transformative. And if you really want to build a culture that's going to move you forward, involve every one of your employees horizontally and vertically throughout the organization to be part of reimagining your business. If you do that, the culture, the cultural unity you'll get, and the willingness of your employees to rethink about what you're going to be in your 2020 strategy and beyond will pay huge dividends. And John gave us great examples of the types of things I'm talking about.
Very good. And how about you, Alan?
So I absolutely agree with that, but also it's like, take the opportunity now to offer the online education to your employees. The more you invest in your employees, the more loyal they become. I know that that's true almost universally.
Very good point. And John, what about you?
You know what, I think just a closing comment, the do it American or the American made thing is great. And it's really cool that this is causing pressure for us to reshore. But just remember, for any manufacturers out there, in order for it to happen, I mean, I'm patriotic and all that, but it's not going to happen just out of patriotism. You actually have to be the best choice. So you have to be better than those people overseas. So you have to work real hard at that and do the Toyota production system, do all that great lean stuff that makes it possible to be incredibly competitive.
Yeah, I think that's great. So I guess my concluding thought would be putting this together would be to value an innovative culture so that you can put all these pieces together and thrive. I would just love to see manufacturing in the U.S. Thrive, and I think that we're well positioned to do so. And more importantly than that, probably, as we can supply customers with what they need even quicker and customize solutions. So that would be exciting to see. So thank you, and thank you for staying over for a few minutes since we had technical difficulties at our beginning of our webinar here. And stay tuned for our next APICS webinar. We have one with Shamrock Foods to see the future of distribution. This was our future of manufacturing. So we'll talk more about the future of distribution and what Shamrock Foods has been doing to navigate this process. So stay tuned. And we also are offering some of this online education that Alan referred to. So we will be sending notes shortly. Please spread the word. We'd love to be a part of providing value to our local manufacturers as well as the careers of our manufacturing and supply chain professionals. So, and thank you to all the panelists. I really appreciate it, and thank you for your patience in getting started.
You're welcome, Lisa.
If there was a disruption, as Jim is always saying, you know, what would we do? So, so thank you all, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody.